Welcome to Moments That Could Have Changed Football Forever. I'm here again with my co-author, Peter Prickett.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. And our special guest today, Rob Porter, who is a coach at Oxford United. Tell us about that role, Rob.
Yeah, so I've got a few different roles in fairness. I'm a league community coach for Oxford United in the community, which is my sort of full-time day job. And then on top of that, I'm foundation phase lead and under-13s head coach for the Girls Academy. So pretty much 50 plus hours a week of football coaching, which, you know, realistically, when you're doing something you love, doesn't really feel like a job.
Yeah, I bet there's a lot of people out there find it, you know, a pro coach, a very glamorous thing, but I bet there's a lot of things that are not glamorous with what you do, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff. There's a lot of time spent on the laptop and stuff like that. But you know, there's a lot of good as well involved, like, you know, stuff like disability sessions, refugee sessions, going to a prison, doing coach education for prisoners.
Oh,
stuff.
Yeah, I love that one. Love that one.
Really fascinating. So, and it's about developing people as well as players as well. So, you know, lots of benefits to it.
Yeah, given that we, you know, the what if, one of the what ifs that we're going to talk about, the what if Pep Guardiola coached in League Two. You know, one of the great quotes from Pep is, "You have the best coaches with the youngest players." And I always think the foundation phase is brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one where there's a lot of coaches are in a race to get out the foundation phase. You know, it's a race to get into adult football or at least sort of YDP, but you know, that's where the magic happens in the foundation phase, where you see those sort of golden moments where players make massive jumps in the space of, you know, maybe even a session or a couple of weeks. And you know, that's where, you know, it's the foundation phase. That's where the foundation of everything's built. So, you know, it's a very special time.
Do you still foundation phase, Pete?
At this moment, no, but I've worked across most phases at some point.
You agree with Rob with that? You know, the magic happens there, the bottom end.
I mean, I've always agreed that you should have the best coaches, and some people say the best. What does that mean? The best at what? I said, as long really coaches need to have an understanding of context and patience and be able to not keep yapping away, and let them just be. And that's that understanding of knowing how and when to do that.
Yeah,
that's what makes them the best coaches, especially for that context.
Yeah, great shout. Yeah. So, Rob, Pep Guardiola. What if Pep Guardiola coached in League Two? What attracted you to that one out of the book?
It's one I spend a lot of time on social media. I don't mind holding my hands up and saying that. It's something that comes up a lot, and it's, you know, it's like, well, he's only done well. He was at Barcelona and then Bayern Munich and Man City, and he spent all this money. And if he hadn't done, he wouldn't. He's not a good coach. It's only the money and stuff like that. And you know, it's a load of rubbish if you ask me. To be honest with you, he's a tactical genius. From what I've seen, videos, clips, he's also a really good people person as well. Gets the best out of people, and you know, I think if you're a good coach, you can be a good coach anywhere.
Yeah, and given the outcome, without spoiling what happens in the book, we take Pep from the start of the season to the end of the season. Do you think what happens in the book is realistic? Did you find yourself getting into it?
Yeah, definitely. I would try not to go into too much detail and kind of spoil it. The fact, where it goes and what happens, and I think it's probably what would happen in real life. Maybe it's not an easy start, but you know, once you create that culture and get the players understanding what you want, I think it goes a long way to creating a successful environment, a successful team.
Yeah, out of all the chapters, it's probably the most fictional one, isn't it, Peter? That one, of all the chapters we wrote.
It's definitely got the most fictionalized middle and end, without a doubt. And maybe one of the only ones, maybe the only one that leaves it on a cliffhanger.
Yes. Yeah, we quite like that. We can remember, we coming up with the characters that you thought would be in a League Two outfit was quite fun. You look round and think, what sort of players would be there? And it was a lot of fun doing that, and I hope that came across.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's like, right, who can he work with, and who kind of would he be showing the door to, and what kind of players would he be bringing in, and sort of without obviously going into too many details, like who he'd be loaning them from.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, without going, without spoiling it, but I did like the idea of Pep loaning young players off United.
Yeah. So that, and obviously, Sir Alex and all the rest of it, I thought was quite interesting. Yeah.
Coming down to have a look to make sure he was handling them right, but it was a joy to actually do that sort of thing. Had you read any of did you read about Pep? Because there's quite a few books out there on him, isn't there? Have you read any of those?
Yeah, I've read one or two, and I'm if I'm anyone, I'm a Bielsa man, to be honest with you. He's always going to have my heart. But yeah, I was thinking Guardiola took a lot from Bielsa as well, to be honest.
He did.
So
yeah, he did.
But no, I think, and it's an interesting one because, yes, he did go to Barcelona, he did start there, but there's so many other possibilities of where he could have started, and obviously that journey where going over to visit Bielsa and things like that, where there's any number of possibilities other ways it could have gone.
I mean, me and Pete have talked a lot about like that coaching pathway, and haven't we? And like that, you get those forks in the road where it could go either way. You just happen to be in the right place at the right time, and I think that happened with Guardiola, didn't it, Pete? With the fact that they weren't doing particularly well. Someone had the foresight to put him in the B team, to manage the B team, and it sort of all fell together, didn't it? I think for him.
Well, Rijkaard's time unravelled, leaving the opportunity there for Pep to step up and step in. I think he would have. I can't remember exactly, who it was, but I know he was offered other opportunities before Barcelona B, in other countries, and where could he could have ended up in Italy. He could have even ended up in Mexico because he did those trips out there.
Yeah.
So he could have ended up anywhere, and I guess it's one of those rare occurrences where it went right. He ended up in what was the right place for him, because where else could people have imagined him managing, really? Yeah. Unless he'd have started something like being at Spain under 21s or something like that. But we've seen that go horribly wrong for various.
Yeah.
I'd say horribly wrong, maybe a bit unfair, but they've not really been able to kick on from that position when they started in the under 21s. And they consider that, here's the opportunity, but it doesn't really go anywhere. So it is always everything aligned in terms of fate, romance, and opportunity, which is unusual.
Yeah. You both coach at a much higher level than I have, but I always think, would you agree that sometimes you can spot kids that are going to, you think, he might make a coach?
Yeah, I do. We've got a coach working for us who actually started coaching when he was about an under 11, under 12, my eldest son's team, and they got to the end of their journey. And I said, "Does anybody want to help out?" And he kind of put his hand up. So he now coaches my youngest son's team, and now he's actually doing some work with the community as well. Great. So he's come on board, and actually he's got into paid coaching through it as well. And you can see those players who've just got that little bit of extra tactical understanding, and potentially those communication skills as well, which are necessary to be a good coach. So, yeah, I think you can definitely see it in some people.
I think there's a few of them where it's not that you see, they could be a coach, because quite a lot of them could end up being a coach. It's some of them you see and you think, how's this kid or this player not going to be a coach? It's just screaming out from them, just screaming. I think all reports are that Guardiola is one of those. Ancelotti was one of those.
Yeah.
Seedorf was described often in that way as well. So there's a few where it's like, yeah.
Well, I think if
not be a coach?
Sorry, Pete. I think of the current crop, they all reckon Gundogan's on his way, aren't he? He did his badges. I think he did. Was it UEFA B at City? He did. I've seen him coaching at City. I think he did like the under 16s or 15s or something like that at City to get his badge, one of the badges. I think it was his B, but they reckon Gundogan's like, blindingly obvious coach in the making.
B will be where they start as a pro. So yeah, would have been the B.
I've seen YouTube clips of him coaching sort of Man City youth teams. So that's another whole can of worms about sort of former pros jumping the queue and stuff like that. But
yes, yeah. Well, I think that's the interesting thing with Guardiola. For everyone has that, brilliant tactician and can do this and the other. But I always think he's quite pragmatic as well at times. That's why I think he would have worked League Two out. Do you know what I mean? He would have worked out how to play. He couldn't have played with the sophistication that he does at City and Bayern and Barca. But I genuinely think he would have worked it out, what he needed to do.
Yeah, and you've seen over time his tactics adapt and he adapts to the way the game's moving forward. So, yes, he would have had to adapt in a different way in that League Two environment. And obviously the level of players would have been completely different as well. So you're not going to have like your Phil Fodens and players like that who are that technically gifted. But yeah, I think he definitely would have adapted and been able to succeed at that level.
Yeah. I think enough. So, like our version of it is, I'm going to give a bit of weight. He does enough, and I think that's what it would have been. It's not dominant. It's not domination. He does enough, and he gets them into a terrific position, and we see what happens. That's the cliffhanger. I don't think he'd have been able to dominate with the players available, and he wouldn't have had the budget. Let's be honest. But at City, he has been able to spend large amounts of money when he's needed specific players for specific positions and roles. That wouldn't have happened, but that wouldn't have prevented a level of success, just not the level of domination we've seen at times from City.
Yeah.
But that's the old Dale version, though. What if it was somewhere else? Now Wrexham are up there.
Yeah.
Have got the budget.
Yeah.
Imagine Guardiola was someone like Wrexham, where the budget is bigger than everybody else. Wrexham, in some ways, are the City of that division.
Yeah,
they can spend on whatever they need.
I think it's quite interesting. I got really good insight. I'm big pals with a lad who's a vice chairman of a lower league club. And I said to him, I was quite interested in trying to make it as authentic as possible. And, so I asked him about the budget. And he said, basically, we give them, this is what you can have. And he said it often works down to like, you can have an analyst or a goalkeeping coach. Which do you want?
Yeah, and that does linked into it. It's like, well, what would he have brought with him?
Yeah.
And what could he have not have brought, and what would his priorities have been, and stuff like that.
I always think, the way the emphasis he puts on the keeper being able to play, they'd probably have gone for the goalkeeper coach.
Yeah.
Which, I love watching lower league football where they try and play out from the back, because you see that technical difference, don't you? How important that first touch is, and the body shape and the whole thing that you have to connect with everybody else to make it work. And then you see lads trying to do it who haven't got that technical ability.
You do, but then every so often you see it, the clips, and they creep through Gateshead. Gateshead scoring a phenomenal goal this season, and from what I've heard, it wasn't uncommon. He got them playing in that way, and I know the coaches that did that has now moved up a couple of divisions. Apologies for not being able to remember the name, but I think what it shows, or what has been shown, is that if you have the faith and you work and you train in certain ways, it's possible. who would have thought that at Bilbao, Bielsa or anyone would have got players playing in that style of football? The Swansea teams that came up through the leagues up to the Premier League, they played that short passing style that it kept them in the Premier League first season and ultimately got Brendan Rodgers a move to a bigger club. And I think comparing Rodgers to Guardiola is quite prescient because, we talked about pros skipping levels. Both of them went out and they worked. They showed that level of curiosity by going out and having a look at other people working and gathering those ideas in a way that it was widely reported someone like Jaap Stam didn't, because he complained about how much written work there was. You can't imagine either Rodgers or Guardiola being in that book. And that's sort of my question, if I've gone a long way around here to get here. How important, Rob, do you think it is for us at any level to watch other people work, other coaches work?
Yeah, I think it's massive. I've been lucky enough where I've managed to go into different environments. Went over to Barcelona to watch the youth teams train and stuff like that. So it's massive, and I think the key as well is trying to gain context, because you can watch a session, but if you can watch a session and ask the coach about why he did what he did, I think that certainly goes away. That's sort of that next level to it as well, to try to find out the why behind what he's doing. So you see a lot of Twitter, X or Twitter or whatever we want to call it now, does a lot of good stuff in terms of session plans and stuff like that. But it's why you're using that practice or that session with your group, I think, is a sort of the level of detail that I think if you can find that and understand why coaches do what they do, is really beneficial.
Yeah, there's not many plug and play sessions out there, and the caveat always, and I guess I take it for granted, but other people might not, is they are just templates that you may or may not find useful for your players. And if they're not useful, don't use them. If they are useful, do use it, but you're probably going to have to tweak it in some way.
Yeah, I found that, and as a young coach, I fell into that trap a little bit of Man City, whatever session, or Barcelona pressing practice and stuff like that. But when you're watching a Barcelona team do it, and then you're trying to copy it with under sevens, it's not going to work the same.
Yeah.
And if you can't adapt it to your players' needs and your environment, then it's a bit pointless.
I think it's one of the things you both touched on as well, is that man management thing, or player management, let's call it player management. And I think one of the best examples, to be fair, is like Ange at Tottenham at the minute. It's clearly got buy-in for what he's trying to do. Whatever he's trying to do, he's got buy-in. And again, me and Pete have talked about it in a way that Ten Hag doesn't seem to have, does he? You can just tell by the body language of some of his players, and I always think he just looks so miserable half the time. You can't imagine having a laugh with him or, taking him for a pint, or anything like that. He just seems so stern. And I just always wonder, they're all millionaires. Is being a martinet going to work these days? I'm not sure it does.
As a Leeds fan, I'm quite happy watching Man United struggle, if I'm being brutally honest. It's not the worst thing in the world, but yeah, and obviously it's quite documented with different players and the issues there, and a good man manager. I think the way you can connect with people, talk to people, is as important as the tactical and the technical side of it. Without that, you can be the best coach in the world, but if you can't get players to buy into what you want to do and enjoy themselves and want to be there and want to train and want to work hard, it kind of all falls down.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things in the book where we tried to think of how we'd get that buy-in, and one of the things was, the things with that, like the fines So instead of the fines going into the big Christmas party fund and they all get drunk on it, because it's like, oh, it's not really a fine if we're all getting drunk, the way he sorted it out and stuff like that, and got the buy-in from the players of what he was trying to do, I think was like key to what you might call the relevance or the authenticity of it. And I still think that is, you both touched on it. I think that is so important. To get the buy-in from the team of what you're trying to do is a big part of it.
Well, in a few of the books on Pep, they talk about early on he sought the advice of Cruyff, because there was a big player in the first team whose attitude was really poor and it was impacting everybody around them. And the advice of Cruyff was, get rid. You might suffer in the short term, but in the long term, things will improve. And I think it's in Carragher's book, it's Carragher or Gerrard, talks about when Gerard Houllier came in and the influence of Paul Ince when Houllier arrived. And there's a game at Old Trafford where Liverpool are winning 1-0 and Ince has a little bit of an injury and there's only a few minutes left and he requests to come off the pitch and Liverpool end up losing the game. And Houllier tears into him saying, that's not what I expect from my captain. And like all of the others, Carragher and Gerrard and everyone are like, well, blimey. He's not afraid of anyone. He's in charge.
Yeah.
I'm mentioning both of these because I'm going back to Manchester United and thinking, is that what's needed there? Is that what Pep would do in the United dressing room? Is that what Pep would do at Wrexham, Oldale, whoever it is? Immediately, you've got to identify who might be a problem.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's Ibrahimovic that's the legend, isn't it? Where Pep clearly wasn't having him right from the start,
Yeah, he was a proper character. Just trying to think, was there anyone at Man City who kind of got rid of straight away? I know, Pete, you'll probably know.
Joe Hart, I think. I mean, that was probably for a reason, but that was, everyone was like, wow, because that was the one thing. For whatever reason you do it, Joe Hart was like a legend at City, because he came in, just before the money and then developed and was, for me, the best keeper in the Premier League for like a couple of seasons. And then it was like, and you're out. And it was like, that was a big call for whatever reason. It was a big call and it rubber stamped the fact that Pep was in charge. It did.
It didn't work initially, did it?
Not really, no. Claudio Bravo was signed for the right reasons to play out from the back. But as I often say, if we'd have had a tree in the goal, we'd have conceded less goals than we did. I think there's a great, we were talking about it, there's a great stat of when Claudio was in the goals, the first shot on target went in for about 5 games on the trot. You could just start one, it'd be good.
Yeah, he wasn't the greatest. But I think going back, Joe Hart probably was for that, the playing out from the back, really, wasn't it, in fairness? And eventually he got the right keeper in with Edison. And the difference a goalkeeper makes with his distribution is massive.
Yeah. I can remember the first season, and I can remember, he tried to have Pablo Zabaleta as an inverted fullback. And clearly Pablo had no idea what he was trying to do. And then, of course, that sort of transmitted to the crowd. And they were so unused to seeing people trying to play out from the back. And it took probably till the first 5 or 6 matches of the Centurions season where he's got Edison in the goal. And people could see how playing out from the back worked. That the squeals stopped happening from the crowd, where they pass it across the 6-yard box and hear that across the crowd.
Do you think the squeals would ever stop in League Two?
I Well, what I know for certain is I went to a couple of games at Burnley last year, early on in the season, ironically, you know, when Vinny had taken over and it was like the championship. And even though they were winning, you know, they had a decent start. I think it was like 6 games in, they were still squealing. You know, the fans were still squealing when it was going across the 6-yard box. So, yeah, Peter, to answer your question, I don't think the squeals would ever stop. They wouldn't. I heard them today at City Women's game. I was at the City Women's game.
It's kind of an ingrained,
you know, they were
older generations. Like, it's always that don't pass across your own box. And I've heard it shouted with grassroots games from parents, you know, don't pass across your own box and stuff like that. And it's like, I think it's more a generational thing, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it is. Don't do it there.
Yeah.
It's the biggest show, isn't it?
What if the Munich air crash had never happened?
What if Michael Owen had stayed fit?
What if Ajax never sold?
These are just some of the things discussed in a brand new book, Moments That Could Have Changed Football Forever. Every what if moment in the book has been chosen to spark debate. Buy your copy now online at Amazon or Waterstones.
So welcome back to the second half of Moments That Could Have Changed Football Forever. I'm here again with my co-author Peter Prickett and our guest today, Rob Porter. And the second what if you'd like to talk about, Rob, is what if there was no offside? Why that one?
That one kind of blew my mind a little bit. I had to kind of go back and read it again because it was like, just the way potentially football could go if you didn't have offside. It was kind of like, kind of very fascinating stuff. Very fascinating kind of thought process behind it, and definitely got me thinking.
Do you think the premise, you know, of that particular chapter is right then, that it is offside that gives the game its fluidity? I think that was the conclusion me and Peter came to. Yeah,
and I think honestly without giving it away, sort of where it would go if offside went and how the game would go. I think it does definitely give it the fluidity.
Yeah, I mean, it is it is scary when you think of how many people are convinced that if you did away with offside, it'd be fine, wouldn't
it? I think it would just turn into like a Route 1 kind of almost kind of rugby kicking kind of contest where you got the big lads and you're just kind of hoofing the ball up to them, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that you're like you do a lot of the foundation phase, but it was one of the things that I used to always rail against, where people would say, oh, we'll have kick-ins instead of throw-ins for the kids. And I would say, well, if you do, it'll just finish up, you know, like we picture with offside, where you just get the kids that can kick it as far as they can. You know, every throw-in will become a corner.
Well, I always do kick-ins, and I have rules to prevent that.
I quite like dribbling. You know, dribbling. You got to touch it twice. Is like
let them dribble in, let them pass it in. But my rule is it doesn't go over shin height.
No, okay.
So then we get actual passes and we get dribbles. Because I have seen it done where people have gone and go out, great, put it down, smash. I'm like, that's not what we're trying to do here.
Yeah,
again, we did quite a lot of research, didn't we, on the different games and how they evolved, you know, and how the size of the pitch in many ways, the constraints that give you offside. And, you know, like you see the games where there isn't any offside, like, you know, that Australian sort of game and the mad Irish games that, you know, the Irish were. I love the rules on those Irish games where it's like, yeah, you have to bounce the ball every 7 steps. Who counts that?
Yeah.
2, 3, 4, foul there. You know, what is going on? I don't know how they do it.
Yeah, I think just going back to that previous point, honestly, I do with train, I do either dribble on or pass on, but it is that point where it's a pass on. So it's not like let's just lump it in behind. And just, you know, and I know I see going into the foundation phase, you're saying, you know, there isn't offsides to a certain point. And I've known coaches who've actually started coaching Offside a year or two before it's come in, and they've conceded a lot of goals from doing it. But actually, then when Offsides have come in, and actually the players understand it,
Yeah.
then they're actually then a step ahead, which is quite fascinating.
It is a lovely thing when you do it with, I think, what age would I have done it with? 9, 10s, I think it was. Yeah, because the year after, at 11, I think, when I was coaching, Offside came in. And to try and get that point across, it is a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think learning the offside rule is, and even I've coached players who even under 13s, 14s still struggle with it every now and again, to be honest with you.
I can remember lining them all up, and walking them through it and going, right, so if you're here when he passes it, you're onside. And if you're there when he passes it, you're offside. And the first time I did it, this kid went, why? So how would you answer that? I really genuinely didn't know what to say.
Yeah, it's quite funny
because you are.
With my team at the moment, it's actually the opposite. Like when we're in those moments where we've got possession of the ball and we can potentially exploit that space, we're actually not high enough, and we're actually sort of passing that ball in behind where the defender's got a 3-4 yard head start, which is then pointless from the other side of it.
Yeah. When you say that it made you think, what sort of things were you thinking about when you'd read it?
I think how poor, how different, but how poor the game would be potentially without it, and what it would turn into, and it's just kind of, I think it would get rid of your technical players, and it would become kind of like basketball to a certain extent, potentially, like the Giants.
We sort of talked our way through it, didn't we, Pete? Where it was like, the way that it develops is, it's five defenders, 5 attackers at one end, 5 defenders, 5 attackers at another. And then Pete said, who's going to be the brave one that leaves just one a little bit further forward for the out ball? And is that how it actually goes back, Because we tried to pitch how it would develop from 5, 10 at each end.
If you think about principles of play, everything is a reaction to something else. So coaches start to do a certain thing. I think in the beginning it would have been a reaction to the rules or laws, to be more precise. It would have been a response to what the laws allow you to do. And then the next reaction would have been to what those coaches are doing. Like the WM was in reaction to the change in the offside law.
Yeah.
And then the change to that was the Hungarians went, we can drop a forward in because no one's marking that player. And the Brazilians went, we can push players out and we can get fullbacks. And that gives us another player in midfield. And all of these tactical reactions, but also reactions occur within the style of play as well. Like playing out from the back, which we mentioned earlier, because teams were dropping into these deep, low blocks early. Like, okay, we've got loads of space to play if we just pass it short, can draw them onto us, and it's all reactionary to whatever is happening and who's going to be the person to change it. Like we now got Denitz in Brazil being different and reacting against positional play. So it's always going to be who's going to be the person that's brave enough to do something different, but also who's going to be good enough along with their bravery to do it well.
Did you watch Tottenham versus Chelsea, Rob, on Monday?
No, I didn't. I was actually out coaching.
Have you seen any of when they went down to 10 men and 9 men, and then he basically had them standing on the halfway line?
Yeah, I've seen bits on social media, sort of some tactical breakdowns and bits like that. It was a very, very, very high line.
But I found it quite interesting, that he was trying to play in half a pitch, basically, wasn't it? So it would have, that half pitch thing would have reduced the impact of 9 against 11, I guess, was the idea.
Yeah, didn't quite work, but
no, it didn't. But it took Chelsea a while to work it out, and I think it was Cucurella. They played the ball to Cucurella, and he didn't pass it. He just ran from deep. So he couldn't have been offside. Do you know what I mean? He was behind that line. So when they played it through, he ran through the gap and he wasn't standing on the line. You know, they sort of worked out that they didn't have to all stand on that line. And if some of them dropped back and then ran through, that was the way to beat it. It's quite interesting. I found it fascinating watching it.
Yeah, it's a shame I missed that one, but that's the half the time I do miss a lot, especially like the European football, because I'm out most nights of the week, unfortunately.
Oh, of course, yeah. I bet you're saying not Thursdays then, are you, Pete, at the minute?
Thursday's actually the one night of the week when I'm not coaching, so it's lucky in that way. I wonder about the 9 versus 11, because if you're you're playing 8 versus 11, but if you play 8 versus 11 in the opposition's half, you're playing it in a place where you're less likely to have immediate damage done.
Yeah.
So maybe about controlling the overloads. But one of the things it made me think is that we talk about no offside. What if offside moved? What if you got rid of the rule that you couldn't be offside in your own half?
Yeah.
What happens then?
And yeah, I mean, if there was literally, you could potentially have your centre backs pushing up to the edge of the opposition box, and that would be a real game changer. That could be fascinating, to be honest with you.
I think they had that, at the start. When the laws of the game are evolving, I'm sure I've read something about that where, it developed into you could only be offside in the opposition half.
It would match with the rugby related origins.
Yeah. And the other thing that I found fascinating with, because you do look at the laws, and I still think there's a couple of great what ifs that we might mine out of them. But there was a great, there was, as the laws developed, and it said, and the goalkeeper could only pick the ball up in the penalty box. Sorry? At some point the keeper must have been able to pick it up anywhere, which was like, wow, what did that look like?
Yeah, and then when the goalkeeper couldn't pick up from a back pass.
Yeah, that's right. And if you think it took, what was it? It took till something like 1910 or something like that, where the goalie wore a different shirt. They had the same shirt on, which is like, wow.
That's another interesting one, is obviously how goalkeepers are being used in possession. What's the Leicester-Leeds game? And it was literally at points, the goalkeeper was pretty much a centre-back of a back four.
Yes. Yeah.
Although his distribution, fortunately, wasn't very good.
Yeah. Well, I see, with going back to the Spurs-Chelsea thing, and we're all on the halfway line, I was saying if they'd have had Ederson, if Spurs had have had Ederson, and Ederson's somewhere halfway between the halfway line and his penalty box, it would have made it a little bit different. They all say, Ederson could probably play Championship Division 1 midfield type thing. He's so good with his feet, and I thought that was an interesting one. If the keeper had a push right up there, then you're inviting shots and all that. It could have been Chipperfield Circus, but interesting.
What's the starting position of the Spurs goalkeeper? Because I haven't seen enough of it to know.
You sort of edge of the box in the D from memory.
See, because if they'd really been braver, he could have been higher. He could have been higher with that
was what
line,
I was saying.
And
exactly
playing almost not in possession, but out of possession, playing like an actual real sweeper.
Yeah, that was my point. And the point then is, if he's the sweeper and you're going, well, they might try some long shots, but you try getting long shots, away while you've got a line of almost like 6 they had, blocks, and, because you wouldn't have been hitting it from the halfway line. The long shot would have been, 10, 15 yards back to get a clear shot. So it did make me think that of how it would have panned out. It was an interesting one. For certain. We think, but one of the premises in the offside thing is Big Sam. Rob, talk to me about Big Sam.
Yeah, wasn't very happy when he got appointed Leeds manager.
Oh,
quite happy when he went. But Big Sam over the years, he had some players like JJ Okocha and others. So not all of his teams were were that bad at playing. It wasn't all long ball football with Big Sam. He's a bit of a stone age pony, but at the same time, he had some good teams over the years, so got to give him that.
It's funny that you mentioned him. If you ever talk to Bolton fans, that it's like, what are you talking about? You want long ball? We had JJ Okocha. It's like,
oh, what a player he was!
So that covered all the sins.
Yeah. But no, I wasn't very happy when he got appointed Leeds manager. But fortunately, it was only 4 games.
Did your heart drop, Pete, when Sam got the England job?
At the time when we were supposed to be looking at the England DNA,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Because even then, that didn't match with Roy Hodgson.
No, that's right. Oh.
So if the DNA was saying that we'd like to play in a certain manner, it just doesn't chime. I mean, I think with Hodgson, it wasn't actually the DNA; it was the future game. Sorry, and the future game was talking about playing 4-3-3. Hodgson didn't play 4-3-3. We didn't play, So
right.
we had all of these inconsistencies, and if you need to set an example that's at least somewhat tallies with what you're trying to implement. Otherwise, it becomes pointless. And whatever people might think of Gareth Southgate, at least there's consistency there.
Yeah, he's been through the process, hasn't he? He went through the DNA process and the future game process. I mean, it's one of the things I always talk about, the licensed coaches club, and I thought that was so good. And I'll never forget, it was they did have the DNA, they were launching I'm sure it was the time when they were launching the DNA, because it was Dan Abrams and the other lad, was it Crocker? There's a lad called Matt Crocker, I think, did a lot of stuff on like the England DNA, and it was like the big presentation, and this is how we're going to do it, and la la la. And Roy was the guest speaker at the gala dinner, the final guest speaker. And this lad put a question, put him to it, and it was about picking form players and this, that, and the other. And they said, well, what about the DNA? And he basically said, I don't care. And it's like, well, what? We've just been sat here for 3 days. It was soul destroying, and then luckily we managed to move on.
Yeah, Southgate does get a lot of stick, and I think a lot of it's unwarranted. Yes, we could have gone that step further and won a trophy, but in the last 20 years, how often have we been close to actually winning trophies and
exactly,
being a winning team more often than not? So.
And what one of the key messages in that presentation that those 2 lads did was they looked at Germany had just won the World Cup, so it must have been sort of 2013, something like that. And they did a thing on how many of the team, the World Cup winning team, have played together at, under 16, under 18, under 20. And it was like trying to do that Club England thing where you get away from picking, Jeff Horsfield because he scored 3 against Palace in the week, and that we stuck with the players who've been through the system. And you see it on social media, Rob, don't you? You see it all the time where they're going, why is he not? Why has he picked him? He's not even playing for his club. It's because they're trying to build that sort of team sort of ethic, aren't they? I think, or ethos or whatever.
Yeah, Calvin Phillips is an interesting one. As a Leeds fan, loved him, brilliant player. And how he hasn't started more games. I know Rodri's an amazing player, but you think how he hasn't got a few more games with him being in so many competitions, I found kind of fascinating.
That's right. Well, my heart bleeds for him, and for me, it was the one in the week when we've played, young boys, and it's like if he's not starting him, if he doesn't trust him against young boys, he ain't ever gonna.
No.
It's a great shame because he's clearly a great lad, isn't he?
Oh yeah, and you can kind of get fans like, well, why are we not playing someone who's playing every week? But as I said, at the end of the day, he fits what Southgate wants to do. He is a very good player, in fairness.
Yeah.
Rob, with no offside, if that was to come in and the game was to be played in that way, how do you think that might affect player profiles, the type of player that we might see if there was no offside law?
I think you would be looking at trying to find your Peter Crouchers, wouldn't you? I suppose if a lot of it's going to be box to box, it'd be players who can dominate physically and dominate aerially. I think until then, and also try not to give anything too much away until someone then adapts it and thinks, well, what else can we do apart from just this lumping the ball into the box? I think it would definitely change the profile of players that people want to look at and want to sort of get in.
It's that second ball thing as well. Do you not think?
Yeah, you do. That's another thing you hear from the sideline a lot. Yeah, with first ball, second ball,
and it's a really good question, Pete, because I think it's the player profile of the goalkeeper would change as well. You're not playing out with your feet, are you?
No, going back. So we're going to get 1988 Wimbledon versus mid 2010 Stoke City every.
That'd be fun to watch, wouldn't it?
You muted yourself, Pete. Yeah, well, we watched it though. I remember it well. It was like, oh God in heaven, it was.
I watched my son's team play the other week, and it literally they do try to play football normally, and I was running the line, and literally this game just descended into the opposition are booting it long, and then they kind of just went into that trap of playing the same way, and it just become 90 minutes of literally just hoofing it from one box to the other, which is no one's idea of fun, to be honest with you.
It's one of the interesting things about following non-league as much as I do, in as much as certainly the first half hour is very frenetic, and then the second half, the last half hour, is attack and defence more or less, because they're all they're not fit enough to keep up that tempo.
Yeah, and you do get traditional.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I've said this a few times, but the biggest differential that you notice watching non-league and going through, because we do this thing where we follow the winners, and we've done the Vars and the trophy and the FA Cup, but the biggest change, and as coaches, we all love like technical players and clever players and all that. The biggest difference, and I'm sure you've seen it, it just is pace. The difference in seeing a lad play in the Northwest Counties League, and then seeing them play in the Northern Premier League Premier Division, which is only 2 jumps up, and it's like night and day in how fast they can run. It is. Yeah,
speed. I mean, it's speed of players, but it's also speed of thought.
It is.
Ability to read the game and be that one step ahead. I think the higher you get, the more you see that.
Yeah, I mean, what is lovely on non-league cup finals day, you get the FA Vars, and then you get the FA Trophy. So last year it was Ascot versus Newport Pagnell in one game, and then Halifax versus Gateshead in the other. And the first thing we noticed was how much faster it was, because there's 5 levels between them. And you saw some nice players, but who could read the game and who could knock it and had a nice touch. And then you saw like Gateshead and Halifax. It was just twice as quick. It just was. Rob, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. It's a great book. When I originally got it, and sort of went, I was literally going to Tenerife not long afterwards, and sat in the bed chair for the week reading it, and it was a very good read. In fairness, very good read.
And on that bombshell. Great stuff. Thanks for that.
Thank you very much, Rob.
What if the Munich air crash had never happened?
What if Michael Owen had stayed fit?
What if Ajax never sold?
These are just some of the things discussed in a brand new book, Moments that could have changed football forever. Every football fan has a what if moment that they know would have brought their team glory if things had turned out differently. Every what if moment in the book has been chosen to spark debate amongst football fans. Buy your copy now online at Amazon or Waterstones and let us know what's your favourite what if moment in football history.